Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk about the Martian II 220mm frame. It's a frame for 5-inch propellers, and it's similar to the Alien frame from Impulse RC. It's not exactly a clone, so I wouldn't get this if you were thinking about using this for spare parts, because the Alien uses slightly different hole patterns, so the parts here won't work with that frame. So here's everything you get in the box. You get your 4 arms, you get a main plate, a top plate. This is another plate that secures the arms to the bottom plate. You get your PDB and XD60 connector. This is for the back of the top plate where the VTX and antenna wires go through. You get this camera mount system here for the HS1177, and this is also very similar to the way they mount cameras in the Alien frame. You get 8 purple anodized standoffs. Get some plastic standoffs for your flight controller, a little protector here for the flight controller on top of that, and a bag of screws. All this stuff comes in this sort of nondescript white box. Nothing too fancy about that. But they do include a little bit of paperwork here with some explanations of what all the parts are and how everything should be put together. So let's get a few measurements here. The arms were supposed to be 4mm, and they come in at just about 4mm. This is the bottom plate, about 1.5mm. And the top plate comes in at about 1.3mm. So here's a closer look at the arms. The quality of the cut and finish is pretty good for these arms, and no complaints here. It looks pretty solid. The machine that they used looked like it did a pretty good job of making some clean cuts. Now the bottom plate and the top plate is a different story. Obviously the machine that they used to cut these was a poorer quality because there were a lot of burrs and little things, little imperfections here that had to be filed down, and I had to use a file to clean it up. And even after doing that, it still doesn't look that great. You can see I made a lot of scratch marks here when I was trying to clean out these interior cutouts. So not the highest quality for this bottom plate, but it's still pretty solid. It doesn't flex at all. So the top plate was not as bad as the bottom plate, but it still required a little bit of cleaning up, and it looks fine, and the strength is just fine as well. So this kit does come with a PDB and an XD60 connector, so this will be pretty nice to let you connect your batteries at the center of the frame instead of at the back. One thing to note is that this PDB does not have any voltage regulators on there, so no 12 volts or 5 volts, so you'll need to get a separate voltage regulator to power your flight controller, or get a flight controller that can take direct battery voltage like the Dodo. So here's a close look at the camera mounting system. This piece back here goes onto the back of the HS1177, and these side plates are used to fix the camera angle. So there's 3 camera angles available to you, and then there's notches here on the sides where these go in to set your camera angle. Okay guys, so we're going to start building the frame. The thing we have to do is make sure that we use this fiberglass plate here between the PDB and the bottom plate so that there's no shorts. And that's why this is fiberglass and not carbon fiber. I'm going to put this on top here, and this is the front here, which is where the camera cutouts are going to be. So you need to decide if you want your XD60 connector to be on the left side of the frame or on the right side of the frame. And so that's going to also depend on where your USB connector comes out from the flight controller. So you should check to see which flight controller you have, and make sure the orientation is the way you want it, so that the USB connector is opposite of the XD60 connector, because this will block your USB connector. So what you want to do is sandwich these arms in between the bottom plate and the PDB and this fiberglass plate here. And we're going to match up this whole pattern for these arms to the bottom plate. And we'll set up all four of these like so. They should all key in together. And you want to use the 12mm screws. You probably want to start in the center and then work our way out. So we'll start here with this. And let's do one arm at a time here. And line that up. It's a little fiddly getting all this to line up at first. Okay, so it's going to fall apart, so you need to at least put one bolt on, or put one nut on here so it doesn't, the screw doesn't come out. Put that on, and go to the next one. Okay, so it's a little bit fiddly to getting all of these parts to fit together. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, and you want to start with the four screws here in the middle, and you want to go from the top to the bottom, and you're going to put the nuts on the bottom here. So do the four in the middle, and then do the four on the outside, and it'll hold everything together. I did not tighten all the nuts at the beginning. I just kept them kind of loose so they wouldn't fall apart. And then I tightened everything up at the very end, and it's nice and stiff now. Another thing that another tip that you guys should know about is that you should tin all of your pads here on your PDB and solder on your XD60 connector before you go ahead and assemble this, because doing that after will be rather difficult, especially with the XD60 connector there. It's going to be impossible to solder. And as you can see here, I've added some liquid electrical tape to cover the contact points between the positive and negative of the battery terminals here, because you don't want those exposed and having some piece of metal shorting that out and potentially damaging your battery or causing a fire. So definitely put some liquid electrical tape to cover that up, because it is exposed. So these four screws here for the flight controller are going to come from the bottom up. Okay, so this is what it looks like with the nylon stand-ups there for the flight controller installed, and all these screws for the arms installed. And this is what it should look like on the bottom. Now let's get the, we'll do the standoffs next. Going to use the 6mm screws for the standoffs. Okay, so here are all the 8 standoffs installed to the bottom plate. I'm going to install this antenna holder to the back here first before we install the top plate onto the main body. You need 3 of these 12mm screws and these 3 anodized small standoffs. And then these 2 screws will go into the standoff here in the back. We're going to take our, before we do that though, we're going to take our camera plates and install those next. Okay, so here's the frame fully assembled. Didn't take me too long, about 15-20 minutes to get it all together. I have a lot of experience building frames, so it was fairly straightforward for me. If you follow the diagram that was provided in the box, it's not that difficult to follow. So let's get a couple of measurements here. Motor to motor distance, front to back, is about 138 millimeters, and side to side it's about 172 millimeters, and the motor distance diagonally is right at about 220 millimeters, which is what it should be. Frame without electronics comes in at 140 grams, which is exactly what says in the product description. So pretty accurate there as well. Okay, so that's a look at the Martian II 220mm frame. I will definitely be building these out pretty soon. I am still collecting components for this special build. So stay tuned to my channel for a bunch of future videos covering this frame, of course, the build and flight videos. If you guys have any questions about how this is put together or about the frame itself, leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.